Welcome to the July the 21st, 1998 pre-taping of a wonderful history about the city of Grand Prairie, Texas, as we tape people that are very important to the history, and some of them are continuing to make history today. This is our history tape number 341, and we are very excited today. We have Mr. and Mrs. Clyde Barge Lee with us today. Clyde, welcome to the set.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's so wonderful, and I am so glad that you brought Verna with you. Verna, welcome to the set also. It's really great to have you two to come and share your lives with us and relate to the history of Grand Prairie, Texas from your viewpoint. And let's begin with Clyde. Clyde, would you look out into your camera and let's talk a little bit about the real Clyde Barge Lee and tell us your parents' names, and if you'd give us your mother's maiden name, and also where they lived when you were born.
Okay, I was born in Eastland, Texas. My parents were Louis Barge Lee, and my mother's maiden name was Bertie Lee Colley. And we moved to Dallas when I was about 5 years old.
Okay.
And then to Grand Prairie when I was in the 3rd grade. So I feel like a native Grand Prairiean almost.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, I have a sister that's 6 years younger than me.
Would you like to name
is
her?
Linda Wright.
All right. And does she live in Grand Prairie, Texas?
No, she lives in Louisville, Kentucky now.
All right. Now, since you were born in the Eastland area, and didn't start to school until you got to Dallas, how was it as a young person? Do you remember coming all the way from Eastland to Dallas and making new friends in Dallas even before you started to school?
Well, yes, I remember the trip back and forth from Dallas or Grand Prairie to back to Eastland. The main highway at the time was Jefferson.
Yes.
And especially, well, Abrams through Arlington. And I remember distinctly when they opened Highway 80, it was such a pleasure to be on a big road.
Yes, yes. They changed it from the Pike to Highway 80 and made it a state highway, and wasn't that exciting?
Yes.
When you were in Dallas, did you go to any of the Dallas schools there?
Just 2 or 3 years to the old Cockrell Hill School.
The Cockrell Hill School. That's
Yes.
Wonderful. Great. And what did your dad do for a living that brought him from Eastland to Dallas?
He worked at North American.
He worked at North American
Yes.
Aviation. All right, we're going to get to talking about that a little bit more in a
Right.
minute, because I'd like to know where he worked and what he did for North American during the war. Let's get to your move to Grand Prairie, Texas then. Do you remember the move from Dallas to Grand Prairie as a young person?
Oh, sure.
Yes. Was that going to be a real transition for you to leave your school at Cockrell Hill and come all the way out to Grand Prairie and meet new friends?
No, it was exciting.
All right. And where did you go to school?
To Travis.
To Travis Elementary. And who was the principal and maybe your teacher or someone you remember real well?
Mr. Harris was the principal at the time, and I can't think of his first name.
All right.
I had one of my teachers was Estelle Terry, Mrs. Burkeen, Mrs. Lane Finley.
Yes.
Let's see. Oh, Edith Robinson.
All right.
She instilled in me a love of music.
She was one of your favorites.
She was
then.
the music teacher.
Yes.
And she was a dear lady.
All right. And then on from Travis, where did you go?
Well, okay, at the time, we didn't have a junior high school in Grand Prairie. You went to grade school through the 8th grade. Okay, when I was in the 7th grade, they built the Grand Prairie Junior High School, which is now Lee Junior High or Lee Middle School.
All right.
So I went to the new junior high for 2 years.
All right.
And the 8th and 9th grade.
All right,
and
were
then,
there favorite teachers that you had there at Lee Middle School?
Yeah, Gilla Crane. She later was married in Gilla Circle. She still lives on Center Street. And she was back then, in junior high school, we had wood shop,
Oh, yes.
and she was the wood shop teacher.
Well, that's
So,
unusual, isn't it? How
yes.
great.
But she also is, I guess, responsible for my love of wood.
Yes. And the craftsman that you've become, and
Yes, and
have
refinishing.
That. Yes, oh, that is wonderful. All right, and we have you into Grand Prairie now in middle school. Where'd you go to high school?
Well, Grand Prairie High School. I have a picture here of the
That's
old
the old
high
red school. Old red schoolhouse.
This is the old red schoolhouse. It was up on College Street.
Yes.
It was just west of the present administration building.
All right.
Which is not the administration building now.
Alternative Center or
Right.
whatever it is now. Yes.
But anyway,
It used to be the old auditorium, didn't it?
yes,
Yes.
it was.
Yes, it was. And you graduated from Grand Prairie High School in what year?
I graduated in 1953.
All right.
We moved into the new high school
Okay.
up on the hill, and here's a picture of it, if it shows.
If you'll
in,
tilt that down just a little bit, let's watch the monitor and don't get all of the glitter on that. Right there, I think we can get a picture. And that was done by BC Plumbing Coming. That was
Yes.
a promotional deal, wasn't it?
Right. Well, they
Yeah.
gave all the seniors in 1953 one of these plates.
How exciting. I've not seen one of those. That's a very historic item.
We moved into that building over the Christmas holidays my senior year, so I was there half a year.
Half a year.
When it was brand new.
Did you have any favorite teachers at the old high school before you left there to go to the new one? Anyone that helped you form your life or that really encouraged you?
Well, one that I liked very much was Mr. Garrison.
All right.
He was a history teacher. And let's see, Mrs. Gentry was an English teacher. And of course, they all went up to the new building too.
And who was the very first principal of the new high school? Was that Tom Holly?
No, it was
No?
Browning Combs.
Browning Combs was the very first. He went that half year with you as the principal.
Right.
Good. Glad to get that on the record. That's wonderful. And when you graduated from Grand Prairie High School, we're going to get into that a little bit later on because you know what? We have Verna just sitting in the wings. She's not
Yeah.
even into this picture yet, is she?
No.
All right. Verna, we're going to let him rest a minute and let us find out about your parents. Would you bring us up to date on them, please?
Okay, my parents were Verna Helen Dornbluth and Carl Henry Dornbluth. Her maiden name was Gopert, so they're both kind of unusual names.
And spell her maiden name?
Goppert.
Thank you.
So we always have to spell our names.
Yes.
So, we came to Grand Prairie in about 1942. My father was in Houston, and he went to an aircraft training school in order to come and work for North American Aviation. This is the Victory, his certificate.
If you'd hold that up under your, right here,
Okay.
that's good.
Victory Aircraft Training School as an aircraftsman. And then later on, when he was working for North American Aviation, this is his certificate for some further training in blueprint reading. And so we were here, and we first moved on Small Street for a couple of years, and then after the war, well, my mother and father bought a house on College Street, which was an old farmhouse from the turn of the century.
Oh, great. Now, I need to get back to Houston.
Okay.
Where were you born?
I was born in Cuero.
In Cuero, Texas. And what was your mom and dad doing for a living, and what were you doing in Cuero waiting to be born?
Well, they had a hardware store, or a 5 and 10 cent store, it really was.
Yes.
And that's what they managed during the Depression, unfortunately.
Yes, but that was a living.
Yes.
Oh, that was a great living. And so you're being born in Cuero, Texas. Where did you start to the first grade?
I started in Grand Prairie. I was 4 when we moved
When you
here.
4 when you moved here?
I started
Okay.
at Travis, and then I went to Austin Elementary.
All right.
One
Let's get back to
Okay.
Travis, though. How long were you at Travis?
Oh, I was just there a couple of years.
Couple of years. Favorite first grade teacher or anyone that you want to remember?
I can't remember it that far. I'm sorry.
All right. Let's go on to
We'll
Austin.
have to go to Austin.
Yeah, let's go to Austin.
One of the people who was my principal, not only at Austin, but also at Grand Prairie Junior High and at high school, was Lloyd Bowes.
Oh, well, great.
And he kind of traveled up with us.
Yes.
So
He didn't trust y'all, so he followed you all the way.
Evidently.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I love it. And from Austin Elementary, then where?
I went to Grand Prairie.
Did you go
Junior
to a
High.
middle school?
Grand Prairie Junior High was
Okay.
7 through 9, and this is my certificate for completing Grand
Even
Prairie
before
Junior
it
High,
was Lee Middle
which was
School.
Lee Middle School now, or which is Lee
So it
Middle
was
School.
really a Grand Prairie Junior High.
Yes, the entire city, which was nice because we got to
Yes.
meet everybody.
Mhm. Who were your favorite teachers at the Grand Prairie Junior High?
Well, the couple that come to mind, this was when Earl Tom Keel first came to Grand Prairie. I had him as a music teacher the first year he was in Grand Prairie, and then on through high school. And James Wallace was a history teacher. He is still teaching night school at South Grand Prairie High. Lois Miller still lives here.
Yes.
She was one of the math teachers, and
Yes,
she was one of my favorite teachers. So
that's great.
there-
And then on up to Grand Prairie High School.
At Grand Prairie High School, as I said, Mr. Bowes went along with us, and Miss Roy still comes to our class reunions. She
Yes.
was an English teacher there.
Very tough teacher.
Yes.
Very-
Miss Height also.
Yes.
She is an old Grand Prairie family.
Yes.
And she was an English teacher.
And you graduated in what year from Grand Prairie High School?
1956.
1956. And I'd like to know just a little bit more about your dad's work at North American Aviation, if you can tell us what he did at North American, since we do a lot of history researching on these things.
Okay. Unfortunately, since I was very young, it's hard for me to know. I know my mother also worked there.
Well, good.
She was in the blueprint crib.
All right.
And I think my dad was on the assembly line, and then he went to the blueprint crib. That's why he took a course in blueprint reading.
Yes. Oh, that's wonderful. That's a wonderful history of a lot of things that happened during the wartime, and those of us that worked there the day that the war was over, we were very glad the war was over,
Yes.
but we were out of a job.
Right.
Yes. That's a new thing to face, isn't it? All right, now,
Insert something.
let's get back to Clyde. Yes, you're a North American, too.
My dad
All right.
was in the sheet metal shop at North American.
All right.
His foreman was A.W. Sowell.
Wow.
Way back then. I
Yes.
just wanted to mention.
Oh, that
A.W.
is great, because A.W., understood he was in the woodworking department at one time, but I'm glad he was in the sheet metal when your
Right.
dad worked for him.
And experimental department too, I think.
Oh, that is really great. I know they would bring home some tall tales. Did your dad work on the day shift or the night shift?
The day shift.
On the day shift. Okay. Let's get back to you now. How did you two meet? Who's going to tell us how you two met each other?
Well, we both are members of St. Andrew's Episcopal Church.
All right.
Shortly after I became a member there, Father Fox, who was the priest at the time, introduced us to each other.
Uh-huh.
And so we went together for 3 years and then got married
Yes.
at St. Andrews, and we're still there.
All right. All right. Did you further your education in any way after you got out of high school?
Went to Arlington State College for a while. I went to North Texas for a little bit, and I finally graduated from SMU.
What a trail.
In 1978. It
Yes.
took me 25 years, but I made it.
Yes, that's great. And what was your major?
Business.
In just business. Okay, that's a good career. And during all of this time, when you were going to all of these different schools and everything, did you work out of into the business world
Oh,
at
yes,
all?
yes.
All right. What were you doing for a living?
Well, at first, in fact, when I was still in high school, I worked in the shop at One Price Optical.
Good.
And I worked there for several years, and after high school when I was going to school at Arlington State. And Then I went to work for Chance Vault then.
Good.
And I worked there 3 years, and I was on the night shift. And so I went to school in the daytime and worked at night.
That was a good career change for you, wasn't it?
Right.
All right.
Then later I went to work for Arlington School District in the tax office as an appraiser. And then of course went to work as an appraiser for the City of Grand Prairie tax office for Ed Jones was the assessor. And then when Ed left the tax office to be the head of urban renewal, I became the tax assessor then.
Yes.
And I was with the city for 17 years.
17 years doing taxes. Oh my, that is exciting.
I was the most disliked person in town, I'm sure.
Not really, not really. Okay, let's find out a little bit more about Verna. Verna, when you got out of high school, how did your career develop?
Well, I went to Arlington State College for a couple of years and really didn't know exactly what I wanted to pursue. So during that time, I also worked in the Grand Prairie City Tax Office for Ed Jones, as it turned out. And then we had children, so I stayed home with my children. That's a luxury people don't get anymore.
Yes, but, well, let's talk about the children and start naming your family, would you?
Okay. Carl was born in 1961, and then we had twins who were born in 1968. Carl went to Grand Prairie High School, and Andrew and Andrea went to South Grand Prairie High School.
All right.
So we are very versatile when it comes to cheering for the high schools.
Tell us a little bit about Carl, would you?
Carl is, he just recently got a promotion. He has lived in Texas. He lived in Grand Prairie at one time, lived in College Station, and he works for Interstate Batteries, and he has just become a regional manager and moved to Atlanta as of last week.
Oh my. Did he take any grandchildren of yours with him?
Yes, Jason and Amanda are our grandchildren.
And their mother?
And their mother, Terry.
Wonderful. Well, I know you're going to miss them being in Atlanta, but that's progress, isn't it?
Yes.
All right, now tell me about the twins.
Well, they graduated from South, as I said, and one of them...
Andy and Andrea.
Right. We called them Drew and Drea because we couldn't tell them apart when we were calling them.
Yes.
So Drea has since graduated. She graduated just this last May from Dallas Baptist University.
All right.
She works in telecommunications. She loves to write and has written a children's book that has been published. And she would like to write more if she could find a publisher. So that was a very exciting time. Right. Andrew lives here in Grand Prairie, and he has a daughter, Sabrina. She lives in Arlington. I was going to say something, I forgot what I was going to say, sorry.
That's all right. And now that we have all of your family introduced and in their right place, you could continue on with your career after the children left.
That's true. I went back to Arlington State, which was now the University of Texas at Arlington, and I completed my bachelor's degree with a major in English, and then went to North Texas State University and received a master in library science, which, of course, at this point, I am a librarian at South Grand Prairie High School. I have been a librarian in the Grand Prairie schools for 22 years.
And have a love for the Grand Prairie Library.
Yes, I do have a love for the Grand Prairie Library.
Yes, serving on its board and working on the expansion committee and all of this good stuff. Tell us about your experience with that.
Well, that was a very interesting experience, as we know. I'm very excited to see that the expansion, the groundbreaking has begun and they're starting on it, and I was on the library board for 6 years. I was chairman 2 years, which is when the council voted to expand the library. Just last week we formed a Grand Prairie Memorial Library Foundation, of which anyone may join, and we hope they do.
Yes.
And I'm the vice president. Joan Longorio is the president. So we're really excited to get the library on its way.
That is a step forward, having
Yes,
a foundation to back up your library.
Yes, it is.
Okay. We're going to talk with you a little bit more about your career as a librarian at South, but let's get back with Clyde. Clyde, we have one little brochure here that we haven't gone into that I believe that has a picture of a former mayor, and we also, and it's a map and all the good stuff. And what year?
It's a map of, in 1953.
Yeah.
This is, was the president of Grand Prairie State Bank was G.H. Turner.
He was also the mayor here at one time.
Yes, he was the mayor for several years. There's a picture, here's the picture of Grand Prairie State Bank. It was on the corner of Main and Center Street.
Yes, northeast corner.
Right.
All right.
There are other pictures on here. The city swimming pool,
Yes.
which was at Turner Park.
Yes.
And that pool has been closed for several years.
Yes, it has.
Here's the Grand Prairie Junior High School. And back in 1953, the white area is the city limits.
Yes.
The gray part is outside the city. So
All
the
of-
town
all
was
of
quite
that-
a bit smaller.
All of that was very small, wasn't it? Oh, my.
I can remember going back to South Texas, we were driving down, and when you passed the cemetery up here, that was the end of
That was
town.
it.
You were out in the cotton fields.
That's right. Also, we're going to talk about it when we close the show. You have brought us a treasure of a map that hung in the old City Hall,
The old.
the old City Hall that was on Southwest 2nd Street,
Right.
now near Lee Herring's insurance place.
Right behind that.
Right behind that, and to present to the historical organization. And I'm so glad you trusted me with it, because I'm going to really look this thing over
Well, I've
before
guarded that for several years. We used it in the tax office when the tax office was in the old community building behind the City Hall on Main
Annex,
Street.
the City Hall Annex.
Yes.
Yeah.
We used that map. When we moved into the new City Hall,
Yes.
there was no place for that to be hung, to be used
Yes.
in the new building.
And they didn't
so
give
it
this-
was going to be thrown away, and so I rescued it.
I'm
and
so
have
glad you
kept
rescued it.
all these years.
Oh, that is just wonderful. The historical organization will be so excited to receive that, because there are many things on this that we cannot pinpoint in actuality, by the people that live here now really don't know
Right.
what was in that place prior to. So we thank you very much for that gift, and we'll see that that gets to the right people. But since you left as the tax collector, assessor, and everything for the city of Grand Prairie, what does Clyde Barge Lee do for a living now?
Well, for a while I was a property tax consultant,
All right,
but I quit that 2 years ago
all right.
and retired from it. And I'm now just pursuing my hobby, which is refinishing antiques. And I love it. As I said earlier, Gilla Crane instilled in me a love of wood,
Yes.
and in that junior high wood shop. And so I get a great deal of pleasure out of taking something ugly and horrible looking and making something beautiful out of it.
Yes. And how many hours would you say a week do you get to play with the furniture?
Oh, it varies.
Yes.
I'd say anywhere from 5 hours a week to 30 or 40 hours a week.
Well, do you do this for commercially? In other words, if I had some furniture that I wanted refinished and I called Clyde, and you'd say, well, I just do this for fun and I just do my furniture. Would you do anyone else's that happened to have something glorious that they wanted refinished?
Yes, I'd love to.
Oh, love to get your hands
The
on that.
problem is, though,
Yes.
if you send something to me to refinish, and by the time I get through with it, I've handled it 15 times, every square inch.
Yes.
I don't want to give it back to you.
Yes,
I want to keep it.
You want to hold on to it, don't you? Well, we have, I believe, a painting that Verna painted.
Yes.
Verna, I don't know whether he can pick this up, whether Lewis will be able to show this at the end of the show or not, but this is the farmhouse that you have on College Street?
Yes.
And y'all, one of these days are going to restore that?
We're going to try to restore it. We're going to begin, I hope, in the fall, but that's where Clyde does his refinishing.
Yes.
And this old farmhouse down at the base of the hill on College Street. When we moved in, it had no sewer. We had an outhouse, and
Yes.
there were some barns back there. We had a septic tank. We also had to have the propane gas because there were no city utilities at
Yeah.
the bottom of College Street at that time. And so I painted it recently when I started taking paintings. So that was what I wanted to do because that's the way I remember it.
Have you researched to see to whom the farm belonged prior to your
I know
getting-
it was a Mr. Edwards.
A Mr.
And
Edwards.
Then there was a Mrs. C.C. Nolan. It was was his daughter, and she was active in Grand Prairie, maybe in the Women's Club for a number of years. And that's
Yes.
who my mother and father bought the house from.
All right. Now, let's talk to you a little bit about being the librarian at South Grand Prairie High. Was that the first place that you ever became a librarian?
No, I was at Jackson Middle School next door for 10 years, and then I moved over to South, and I've been there ever since. And being a librarian is more exciting than it seems.
Well, I'd like for you to tell us about being a librarian. I think the boys and girls maybe that flip through our show every now and then would like to know about that, because maybe you will inspire one of them to become a librarian.
Well, that's possible, but I do get, when I go out in the community or go out to eat, the students, come up and they'll remember you and thank you for helping them. And of course, it's very exciting now in the information age.
Yes.
Because of the internet and all the wonderful resources that we have available now that weren't available just a few years ago.
Yes.
So we really enjoy it, and the kids are wonderful, and our faculty is too.
And do you plan on being a librarian forever, or are you going to pull a stunt like Clyde has and retire one of these
Well, I
days?
hope I get to retire, yes. Maybe in a year or two.
All right, and after that time, I know that you're going to have to dedicate some of your time to the Grand Prairie Memorial Library and the new library that will be built out south one of these
Yes,
days.
that's exciting too, that
Yes.
not only do we have an expansion, but the new library for the south part of town has got some land and it's ready to be worked on, and so I'm very excited about that. I hope I can help in
Wonderful.
some way.
That's great. We have one more minute, and Clyde, we're going to leave that one for you, and you just look out to your camera and say anything you want to about how exciting it's been to live in Grand Prairie these years.
Well, it's been quite an experience. I've loved it. When we moved to Grand Prairie, it was, I suppose, probably a population of 3,000 or 5,000, something like that. And I've seen the city grow, and I felt like while I was at the city and trying to get the revenue coming in through taxis, that I was helping the city to grow. So it's been a pleasure living in Grand Prairie.
That's wonderful. And we're going to let Mr. Louis Tovar come out to our camera and see if he can clue in on this wonderful, wonderful map that you have, and probably close our show while we're still talking about this wonderful map and the fact that it did hang in the old City Hall.
Right.
On Southeast 2nd Street. And it's a wonderful happening. And thank you so much for bringing that and for y'all sharing your lives with us.
Thank you.
We've enjoyed it.
And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.